swarmed locally, she looked at me with shock and horror. And this was, for God's sake, the same girl who'd casually impaled a live baitfish on a hook, the same girl who'd just hungrily cleaned up a large helping of arroz con pollo, a rice and chicken dish for which a good-sized bird had died. Of course, that bird had been killed by somebody else. She hadn't had to get its blood on her own hands. All she'd had to do was let me pay for the crime. When I pointed out the hypocrisy of this, or what seemed like hypocrisy to me, and asked how she could possibly reconcile it with her fierce anti-killing convictions, she got very angry. Apparently, there was another delicate distinction, too subtle for me to grasp, not only between fish and birds, but between birds and birds, between a dead chicken and a dead dove. I said, sure, a dove tastes better if you like doves. At that, she really blew up and said I couldn't possibly be expected to understand, a callous monster like me who carried a gun and showed no respect whatever for life, even human life. As you'll gather, it hadn't been a very restful leave. Being reformed is kind of wearing, even when it doesn't take. After putting her on a plane a week early at her request, I'd decided to spend a final day doing a little angling and exploring alone before heading back to the U.S. to turn in the boat and wind up my leave in other surroundings, but the weather had just put an end to that project. I decided that I might as well use the rest of the day getting the boat back on the trailer and hosing it down thoroughly to wash off 3 weeks' accumulation of salt and fish scales. Any time I had left over could be used for packing, but first, of course, I had to make it back to the San Carlos Marina. It was a reasonably exciting ride, surfing along before the mounting waves with the wind getting stronger and gustier by the minute. The Gulf is no farm pond or stock tank. At Guaymas, it looks like the ocean. You can't see across to Baja California, and it acts like the ocean, too, upon occasion. The Mexicans call it the Sea of Cortez and treat it with respect. I wanted to get in before things became really rugged, so I kept the 85-horse Johnson blasting. Well, as hard as you want to blast in that size boat, in that kind of a seaway, actually not much over half throttle with a mill that large. It was quite a power plant. I'd only had it wide open once in the weeks I'd been using it, and it had scared hell out of me. I'd thought we'd go into orbit before I could get it shut down again. I've dealt with some fairly potent machinery on land, but speedboating is not my bag, and my only previous experience with outboard motors to amount to anything dated back to an era when 10 horsepower was considered pretty hot stuff. Even at half throttle, the boat was a bit of a handful with the sea astern. I guess they all are. It was a relief to come around the towering rocky point guarding the mouth of San Carlos Bay and feel her stop making like a runaway surfboard and settle down to a steady planing attitude in quiet water. I unfastened my parka and threw back the hood. Being designed for fishing originally, whatever my mysterious predecessor had used her for, the chunky little blue and white fiberglass vessel was wide open all around so there'd be nothing to interfere with the rods and lines. You did your steering from an exposed midships console with no windshield to hide behind. If you wanted to stay dry, you put on something waterproof and zipped it up tight, even on a downwind run. I'd mopped the spray off my face and sunglasses, and I was reaching for the throttle to hasten things along, now that the traveling was smooth and easy, when I saw the seal off to the right, to starboard. They're actually sea lions, whatever the technical distinction may be, and they're fairly common down there in the Cortez. But I was just a country boy from the arid inland state of New Mexico, and I still hadn't seen enough of them to take them for granted. I was feeling nice and relaxed and a little triumphant at my victory over the wind and the waves, the way Columbus or Leif Erikson must have felt upon reaching America after a stormy Atlantic crossing. I was in no real hurry to get ashore now that I'd made it into sheltered water, so I put the wheel hard over to get a closer look at the swimming animal. You might say the sleek little beast saved my life, since the rifleman up on the point picked that moment to put the final pressure on his trigger.